So, one of the biggest concepts around the whole identity profile, which moves away from a single typing system, is to not only lean into the idea of what your most efficient number is going to be, your headquarters, your home base, the place that you go to sleep and you wake up every night and every morning. We know that's a part of who you are. But we also want to talk about what is the experience as a human being when you encounter a number that may be very low for you? And what is the difference in that relationship between somebody who expresses a number high or efficiently, or they express it low or inefficient? What does it look like for us to have conversations around what happens to you if somebody interferes with your highest number? And what happens if somebody introduces your lowest number? Does it trigger you in a similar way, or can it have a trigger? What does it look like to be really efficient and really strong and really effective in a high number, but then be struggling to introduce or to utilize that number if it's low for you? So long story short, this series is going to be about conversations in each of the numbers as it relates to when it's high for you, when it's low for you, how it impacts you if somebody interferes with that goal, or if somebody introduces that unfamiliar space. Thanks for joining. So I'm going to ask for grace as we go through the one space, because folks who are efficient in one have an incredible capacity for precision, have an incredible capacity for accuracy. And there is a good chance, based on the last videos that we've recorded, I'm not going to hit it. I'm not going to get 100%. I'm not going to get to perfect. And this is a conversation where we have around not only the gift, the capacity, but the motivation of a one, is what does it look like to be pursuing accuracy, justice, rightness, righteousness, restoration, reformation, all of these things about making the world, ourselves, and our relationships around us right, but having some grace and some flexibility to know that it is not about practice makes perfect. It's about practice makes permanent. And remember, it is what it is till it changes. Because it's concrete permanent. If I say that's a concrete situation, that's a concrete answer. Can concrete be disrupted? Yeah. If you have a jackhammer, there might be a jackhammer running in the background right now, which is making my one space a little uncomfortable because I want this video to be absolutely perfect for you. But what does it look like for me to let go of my desire to hit 100% or more and move into a space where I'm like, it is good enough, not perfect? Because as you practice these processes and you move into spaces where you are exercising the natural capacity of a one, which is reformation or reiteration or course correction, and you move into the motivation and you're seeking out what does it look like to find justice, for things to be justified, for things to be aligned, for things to be accurate and right and appropriate and precise. And then having that gift that a one is so good at, which is agency, of being able to advocate, and not only advocate for others close to you and others in terms of the world and the global policy and impacts that you make, but also what does it mean to self-advocate? Because if you're high in a one, everything that I just mentioned comes naturally to you, and it may even take an effort to stop trying to make everything right, to stop trying to be so focused on that inner critic telling you where you missed it, because you're so aware of where it's being missed. You can walk into a room and immediately unconsciously recognize things that could be corrected because you know what it looks like for things to be correct. So if you're really high in a one space, the capacity to be able to see what could be better is so natural. It's in your DNA. It's in the fabric of who you are as a person. That to be able to walk into a space and say, in fact, that is good enough, let's move forward. And in fact, I'm good enough, I can continue to move forward, would not only take intentional effort, it would take you restraining the natural capacity that you have to try and make it even better. So what does it look like to even let yourself lean into that 9, take a deep breath and rest from all of your efforting? Because when you're high in a one, you know what it looks like to keep trying to execute more effectively over and over and over. So if somebody interferes with that, if somebody walks in and says, you know what, I don't think this is right, and you know it's right, how do you show up? Because if you know what's right, you can be righteous, but you can also be self-righteous. And then what does it look like for that trigger to show up and for you to remind somebody exactly how you know that what you're doing is accurate and what version of you shows up when you're triggered? That is a very different space than for somebody who's low in a one. somebody who doesn't have a natural relationship with precision. What does it look like for you to go, I've got ideas and I've got imaginations and I've got dreams and I've got these relationships and I've got these connections with what I'm thinking through, but man, I really struggle to execute. I really struggle to take that checklist that I have and to actually finish it. Because you got to understand, between an 8, 9, and a 1, the ability to execute something and then try again and try again and try again and to do is very different in the space of a 1. So if you look at your life and you go, man, when I try again and I reform things and I retry things and I reiterate things and I fix it and I improve it and I reshape it, is that something that I do on a regular basis, or am I kind of nonchalant about the accuracy of things? Am I kind of disengaged from the desire for things to be absolutely right? That may not be important to you. And remember, when we talk about these relationships, if a number is low for you, it doesn't mean that you have a trauma in that space. It doesn't mean that that space feels risky. It may be, but it's a both and then some. It could also be, or it could be primarily biased or based in the space that, man, that's just not a language you've spoken regularly. It's not something that was modeled for you. It's not something that you mirrored through a mirror neuron system. So because it's not a language or a dialect that you speak on a regular basis, it's just unfulfilling or unrewarding, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is traumatic. However, if you're low in a 1, could it be that you grew up in a space that was so hyper-focused on you doing everything right that you're like, you know what? This is not life-giving for me, I'm out. Here's a key, and we might mention it in other videos, but just to mention it here. If you are low in a number and you have a history of trauma, your experience had some degree of exit strategy. Because when you encountered that negative, risky space, you had a way to navigate away from that place, and you developed a protocol or a strategy that says, if I encounter that, I got to check out. If I encounter that, I have to pull a parachute and I have to get out of Dodge, because I don't know what it looks like to stay in that space, develop stamina, strength, and skill in that space, because I don't know if I'm going to survive that space. So you kept it low, and you've naturally been avoiding it for a lifetime of experiences because no one either modeled it for you in a healthy way, or it was definitely unhealthy and you had a way to move away from it, so you decided to make that your permanent protocol. It could be both and. It could be either or. It's dependent on your lived experience, and that's something that you have to investigate. But if you're low in a 1 and somebody introduces the nature or the requirement for you to do things better, what does it look like for you to stay in that space long enough to go, yeah, I think maybe that's possible? This is exactly why the process of 3 to 5% improvement year over year is pushed so heavily in the whole identity content. Because anything that leads you to a 21-day better version of you, anything that says you're going to get twice as good in the next 6 months, is a lie. Flat out point. I'm not going to pull punches on that. Because it takes 21 days for your brain to become aware of the conversation being relevant, and then for you to reinforce it in order for that to be more permanent. Because remember, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So as you think through these spaces of a 1 and you're super efficient at a 1, remember, you naturally move into knowing what's not right, what's wrong, what's incorrect. Use your gift of agency and advocacy to be able to say, I can work into spaces that can be corrected, but that is not an indication of shame or brokenness or fear or intimidation. That's an indication of your gift and your capacity to be able to see a way, an avenue, a space where you can advocate for a better outcome. Don't forget to advocate for yourself as well. If somebody interferes with that space and you get triggered, remember, you're in a gut-based space. So your instinct is going to put up a defense mechanism about how that could be an incorrect response from someone else or from yourself. So as you evaluate your relationship around critique or criticism, remember, this is the opportunity to say, if I'm critiqued or criticized, how do I show up? Do I engage and push back and fight? And do I say, I know exactly how this is right? And when somebody introduces the opportunity for saying, you didn't do that properly, which version of you shows up? If you check completely out, or you don't know what it looks like to engage in regular tasks of trying to make things a little bit better, trying to improve, self-development, self-awareness, self-improvement, if that's a language or a dialect you don't speak on a regular basis, what does it look like for both ends, high or low in a 1 space, to allow for the chance to see what does it look like for me to improve myself without shame, without fear, and without intimidation? those may be an opportunity where you can start to really utilize on both sides the natural gift of a 1, which is agency and advocacy.